So, here we see Jesus at yet another meal. This one at the invitation of a Pharisee. Notice, obviously with this series we're looking at Jesus looking at a lot of meals, but he goes to a lot of meals. It's one thing that Jesus does. Evangelism and discipleship over a meal. It's probably one thing that we should remember too, about sharing the gospel over food, because sometimes it can make it a lot more easier and relaxed. But Jesus had barely sat down when his host accused him of not washing before he came to the table. Now I'm sure most of us do generally wash our hands before we sit down and eat. But this wasn't the washing of hands which we do before eating. This was ceremonial washing as understood by the Pharisees. Now I thought at this point, some of you may not know, we talk about the Pharisees. Well, who are the Pharisees? So the Pharisees were among a group of Jewish people who helped to administer Jewish law to the people. Others would be scribes, Pharisees and Sadducees. But what made this group, the Pharisees, different was their desire to be detached from those who interpreted the law different to them. They had to be separate from any type of impurity ascribed by Levitical law or their strict interpretation of it. All Jews followed the laws and traditions handed down by Moses in the Torah. That's the first 5 books of the Bible. But there were lots of oral traditions and guidelines that evolved over the years. The Pharisees had their own book of rules and regulations which dictated what they could and could not do. And this became more important than following what the scriptures said. The Pharisees saw that as having equal importance to the Bible, to the law of Moses. As I was looking at this, I was thinking at some of our church regulations today and wonder if they're really necessary. I'm actually a member of the Church of England, just about, but sometimes I think, do we have too many rules and regulations? So at this point, I'm going to return to so there's Jesus at the table with a Pharisee. So Jesus had been questioned several times in the Gospels about the non-washing of his or his disciples' hands. Because I said earlier that the Pharisees saw this as breaking the tradition of their elders. It wasn't commanded in the law, but it was in the tradition of the Pharisees. Jesus makes lots of comments in the Gospels about this, saying, you've let go of the commands of God and are holding on to the traditions of men. And also, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. Now at this point, I'm going to read a description of ceremonial washing. I knew they did washing in a certain way, but I did wonder exactly what they meant. So I'd read this bit. So the Pharisees were surprised that Jesus didn't wash his hands. This was not a matter of cleanliness, but of ceremonial law. So as usual, every little detail was worked out. Large stone vessels of water were specially kept for this purpose because ordinary water might be unclean. The amount of water used must be at least a quarter of a log, that is, enough to fill 1.5 eggshells. First, the water must be poured over the hands, beginning at the tips of the fingers and running right up to the wrist. Then the palm of each hand must be cleansed by rubbing the fist of the other onto it. Finally, water must again be poured over the hand, this time beginning at the wrist and running down to the fingertips. To the Pharisee, to admit the slightest detail of this was to sin. Jesus' comment was that if they were particular about cleansing their hearts, as if they were washing their hands, they would be better men. But it's very interesting and very detailed. I can see why didn't see it was of any use. Right. Now, carrying on, it also refers to washing pots and pans. And one thing that I find interesting in the Bible is to read things in different translations, and they can add a slightly different dimension to it. So this is actually from the Message version, which is written in very contemporary language. I know you Pharisees burnish the surface of your cups and plates so they sparkle in the sun. But I also know your insides are maggoty with greed and secret evil. Stupid Pharisees, didn't the one who made the outside also make the inside? Turn both your pockets and your hearts inside out and give generously to the poor. Then your lives will be clean, not just your dishes and your hands. The Pharisees were more concerned about keeping ceremonies than about being moral. It is the inside of the man, his heart and inner righteousness, which is most important. Elsewhere in the Bible, in James, he talks about what comes out of a man that defiles him, not what goes in. We have the chance to be made clean within, and with our heart no longer in the grip of greed and wickedness, we give. We also need to look inside our own hearts. So he's saying to the Pharisees, what we show outside is important, but we do need to keep an eye on what we carry in our hearts. And I'm just going to read the one verse which the recording didn't actually cover, or I go on. It says, woe to you Pharisees, because you give a tenth of your mint, rue and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. Verse talks about tithing, giving a tenth of what we have to God, to the priests or the church. The Pharisees were meticulous in tithing, no matter what their inner hearts or feelings were like. However much they neglected justice and forgot love, they never forgot the tithe. Carrying out the internal aspects of religion was all that mattered to the Pharisees. Their hearts might be black or rotten. They may be lacking in charity and justice, but as long as they went through the correct motions at the correct time, they considered themselves good in the eyes of God. Compared with love and kindness, justice and generosity, the washing of hands and the giving of tithes were unimportant to Jesus. Just going to add another point which I realised afterwards I didn't put in. Here's Jesus criticising the Pharisees in lots of different ways, but there were Pharisees who supported Jesus and who actually listened to him, and I think it fairly certainly was the Pharisee that actually provided the tomb that Jesus was laid in. So there wasn't all criticism of them. I'm just going to sort of bring it up to date. And the one thing I'd got in mind when I was doing this, and I thought I just wanted to share with you, this weekend we had our new minister installed, and some of you will know, but not really know, this name is Reverend Mohammed Ejuderitu, and he is from Iran, and he was a Muslim, but he's now a Christian, and how God changed his heart. He came from had to escape Iran from the Iranian underground church. It just when I was thinking about this and how it's so important to allow God to change your heart. It says, you know, here they did all the various rules and regulations, you know, and they thought that was important. But what actually matters is what's inside, and staying close to God and what's in the Bible. Yes, we have lots of rules and regulations and things we do, but what is actually in here is what we should be doing, and listening to Jesus. And just to finish, it says, how often in our church courts and the church people get totally lost in unimportant details in church government and administration. Yeah. We can even argue and fight out about them. I know this with the synod and other things, there are some real mega issues. And we forget the great realities of Christian life. But it's so important to stay true, and that the reason why I'm going to have the last song in a moment, and it's Cornerstone, and for me that's one of the one, you know, yes, I'm in the Church of England, but it's important to remember that he is the corner, you know, we're the church, but he's the cornerstone, and if we don't keep him there, then we're just going to go astray. And so important. So, thank you.